Hi class, Mr. Clark here. Today we're going to be learning some basic watercolor painting techniques. The very first thing you're going to want to do is put your name on your paper with your pencil. All right, then you're going to go ahead and set your pencil aside. You won't be needing it anymore. The other supplies you're going to need for this project are your watercolor paints, your watercolor paint palette, your cup of fresh, clean water, a few different size paintbrushes, a nice paper towel to dry off our paints, and then a dropper as well. The very first thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to use our dropper to create 5 different areas of water in varying amounts. So we're going to put a lot of water in this first cup with our dropper. Then we're going to put a little bit less in each spot there on out. So we're going to put a little bit less in this one, a little bit less, just maybe a little bit, and then maybe a drop or two in the last one. And that'll set us up perfectly for our first thing that we're going to do is our varying water amounts. So for this one, I'm going to use a rounded brush, and then I'm going to go ahead and get some of my water onto my paintbrush and get my paintbrush loaded with my paint. Then I'm going to go and add it to my water, and this is going to create my first section of paint with a lot of water added to it. So now I'm just going to make sure my brush isn't super wet and dry it off, and then I'm going to add my paint that I've already mixed onto my area, and you'll see that it's a very light blue. Next we're going to do the same thing, only we're going to use our medium amount of water. So I'm going to come back and load up my paintbrush and then add it to the medium amount of water. Dry off my paintbrush, and then come back and get this amount. And you'll notice that it's a little bit darker. Finally, we're going to do that one more time. Load up our paintbrush and then mix it with the smallest amount of water in our medium container. Dry off our paintbrush again, and then paint directly from here onto our machine. You'll notice how, once again, we've gotten even darker. Now the last two are going to be quite a bit darker and bolder. For the second two, we're going to paint directly from the palette. So I'm just going to come in here with the water that's left on my brush and mix my paint and directly from my palette, and you'll notice how much darker that is. All right, and our very last one, we're going to get a little bit more water on our paintbrush from our water cup. And then we're going to charge up our paintbrush, and then we're actually just going to leave it soaking, and we're going to kind of swirl it around for a little bit longer than normal before we come back and paint our final section. And this should be the very darkest of the areas because we really loaded up our paintbrush with a lot of paint on there. Now our next section is basically that same thing, only we're doing it directly on our paper. So we're going to start with the really dark paint that we just got, and we're going to paint it on the dark side. And then we're going to just keep adding more water to it to fade off towards our light side. So I'm going to use the water that I've got up here, and I'm just going to add water. I'm not adding any more paint to it. I'm just adding pure, clean water from my water cup or my water paint that I already mixed. So I might add my lightest blue, and then I want to keep going even lighter. So I'm going to come and get some clean water on my brush and just use plain old water for my last few areas to make it nice and really light. And see how we go from dark to light in one fell swoop. Now our next spot, we're doing blending and two color gradations, so it's very similar. We're going to start with one color and we're just going to fade it into another color using our water. So I'm going to use blue and green for this. You can use whichever two colors you'd like, but I'd stick with cool colors or warm colors. So I would do blue and green or red and yellow or red and orange or something like that. I wouldn't do blue and yellow perchance, but you could, and you'll just get green in the middle from mixing your colors. All right, so I'm going to get started, starting with my first color. I'm going to start with my blue. I'm going to get a little bit more water, add it to. I'm going to start with a nice dark blue, and then I'm just going to keep getting some more water. And once I get about halfway down, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my green. So I'm going to come in here with my green and start on this side. All right, and now I'm going to use some clean water to start blending them together in the middle. I'm going to come back to my blue and start to blend them into each other. Maybe I'll come back to my green now and blend it into my blue as I'm blending it into the green, so I can fade from one color to another color. All right, our last thing that we're going to work on is called layering or glazing in watercolor. The very first thing you're going to do is you're going to go through the box with a smaller square-tipped brush, and you're going to paint each different color as they are labeled. So you're going to do green, yellow, orange, red, purple, and blue, and then you're going to let it dry for about 5 to 10 minutes. It needs to be completely dry for this next part of the assignment. So once they've dried, you'll get something that looks like this, and you'll get a nice box with our colors going in one direction. Now, for glazing, you're actually going to come back and go over each one with a medium color and just go straight down. So for my green, I'm going to come back with my green, and I'm going to paint over all of those colors with green. And you'll notice how now I've changed the other colors going down. Now I'm going to clean out my paintbrush. Make sure your brush is really clean before you start your next color. All right, now I'm going to grab some yellow. And be very careful, because if you are not using fresh water, your yellow will get a little contaminated and you'll end up with a yellow-green from the green that you just painted. So make sure your water's nice and clean. Had to make sure my brush was really washed out there, so you probably will too. Come back with your yellow and paint over your colors. All right, and you see as I went a few times, I'm starting to lift up the colors that I already put down. That's not a huge deal, but you don't want to scrub back and forth, otherwise you'll just lift up your colors. All right, next we've got orange, so go ahead and clean out your brush again. Switch over to orange. Right, and then do the same thing. We're just going to draw a line down our orange. Right, now we're going to switch to red. And you really shouldn't do this more than 1 or 2 times, otherwise your paint will start lifting up and mixing. Next we've got purple. Make sure you're cleaning out your paintbrush in between each of these layers. My purple was really watery. Be careful and make sure you're using your napkin to help clean and dry off your paintbrush to make sure you don't have a ton of water on there. That looks better. All right, and then finally we've got blue as our last color we're going to do for our glazes. gonna dry it off. Make sure it's not too wet, otherwise this won't work very well. So dry off your paintbrush and then do your line. Right, and that will get your different glazed techniques. Now, once everything's dry, you'll be able to see how it works very, very well. But basically, you're just creating different colors by layering your colors over each other's. This works really well for dark colors and for just creating new colors in an entirely different way. That's all for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.